Hey everybody, welcome back to H4Games. I'm your host, Tony. Today we're taking a look at a mystery prototype, beta, debug version of a game. We don't know exactly what it is. We have some ideas, but maybe you can help us out a little bit further. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first off, big thank you to MyRetroPop.com for lending us this cartridge. It's actually the last of the 3 cartridges that were sent over to us. If you recall, MyRetroPop also sent over the NFL Blitz N64 Tall Dev cart and a sort of beta debug version of Sumo Fighter for the Game Boy. So I'm excited to be taking a look at the final game that he sent over, and then after that, I can finally get to all of these development Wii systems that were sent over by another individual. So we have a big old backlog of stuff to be taking a look at, but obviously we're going to be concentrating on this today. So we're going to start with what we actually do know about this particular game and also talk a little bit about the dev cartridge itself, just for those of you that may not be familiar with, development on the Game Boy Advance. And also a big thank you to PushDustin of SourceGaming for doing a lot of the research for this episode and also translation. So thank you very much. Very appreciated. So this is a Game Boy Advance development cart. You may notice a tall Game Boy / Game Boy Color style cartridge with a giant board sticking out of it. So basically, yeah, this is just here to provide somewhat of a base for this board. You can imagine if it was a smaller Game Boy Advance cartridge with a giant board sticking out of it, it would be even less sturdy than it already is in this thing. So it's kind of interesting though. It says Nintendo Game Boy, but it actually is not the exact size of a Game Boy or Game Boy Color cartridge. You try to put it in here, does not fit. Whereas you put it in here, Game Boy Advance, it fits very nicely. So essentially it is just a taller Game Boy Advance cartridge. So yeah, this is probably pretty familiar if you've seen other episodes similar to this on our channel, but essentially it's a tall board here with a flexible amount of flash memory modules, right? So if you were developing a game, maybe your game would take a certain amount of flash memory, i.e. storage on the cartridge. Maybe it would be less depending on the title. Here we have 4 modules, and as you can see, this board has the potential for 4 more. There's also dip switches right here, and there's this little connector here. In a previous episode, we showed that there was a module that you could connect and attach onto this that would allow save functionality. I think it was the Rayman GBA development episode we did. I'll have to double check on that, but I think so. I'll put a little link in the card above here. But basically, without that, you can't really save on these, unless there's something different or new about this particular cart and compared to the Rayman one. But my guess is that this doesn't have any sort of SRAM or save functionality on it. All right, so enough of that. Let's talk about the game itself. Here's the title screen, or lack thereof. It says Project, pardon my pronunciation, Toaruva, and then in parentheses it says temporary, or like temporary title. So obviously just a project name. When we click start, we go right into a town. No cutscenes, no intro, no nothing. And of course that's super strange for a game, but basically once you realize this whole thing is just a test environment, it makes sense. Pretty much everything here is about debugging, including this. If you press L, you just automatically go into a battle. You can press L at any time on the open overworld and just jump right into a battle. So in addition to this cart, the owner actually had several early builds of various Demi Kids or Devil Children games, including early builds of Book of Fire and Book of Ice. So I'm not super familiar with this series, so hopefully I get everything right here. But essentially, it's a series of Japanese RPGs. It's kind of like Pokemon in that the games generally come in pairs, i.e. Book of Fire, Book of Ice, and you fight via your demon familiar, i.e. like instead of battling yourself in Pokemon, you battle with your Pokemon. So you have like a demon familiar in these games that fights on your behalf. The games are generally very biblical, with themes of angels fighting demons and Armageddon and end days and this and that. But again, I haven't personally played them, so I'm probably leaving out some details. So we assumed that this particular cart was an early version of Book of Fire or Book of Ice. But now we're not entirely sure what it is. Our best guesses is that it's an unfinished sequel or just another RPG that's utilizing Book of Fire's engine. So art and animations from Book of Fire and Ice are in this particular title, and the ROM name for this prototype has the same ROM name as Book of Fire, as you can see here. Now keep in mind, this isn't a game name, this is the ROM name that you can find in a hex editor, for example. So it's not meant to like flow or look good or make sense to anyone but the developers. Obviously you have stuff like flame you can see in there, but again, this isn't English necessarily, and it's not necessarily for our eyes, so that's why it looks this way. But it's clearly not either of those games for reasons that I'm going to get into in just a second. But instead of just talking over everything, I want to have just a little bit of gameplay footage here of Joshua, the main character, walking around town, just so you guys can get a little bit of an extra feel for it. Alright, so remember when I said that art and animations from Book of Fire, Book of Ice were present? So instead of cutting back and forth constantly between Book of Fire, Book of Ice and this, I'm just going to go ahead and show you guys bits of the intros of those two games so you can kind of see for yourself. Here is Book of Fire and its protagonist. Here is Book of Ice and its protagonist. And also for reference, our protagonist in the prototype, his name is Joshua and does not appear in those games. And as you can just see from taking a look at Joshua and his environment and those other games, the art style is definitely very different. So in Fire and Ice, you can see that the character sprites are like taller and thinner. In the prototype, everyone's kind of like smushed, a little chubbier, kind of almost chibi-ish, a little more cutesy. All right, so here is the debug menu. And there is a ton of content here. Here's some info on the sprites. Here's an option that just shoves your avatar into the corner of the screen. I'm not sure what this is supposed to accomplish, but whatever. Again, there's a lot of Japanese here that I just can't read. Here's a menu just full of maps. And here are some animations. notice that these are present in Book of Fire and Ice. It's also nice that you can go through these animations frame by frame. Here we can select and view character portraits against different backgrounds. We can go through a bunch of different backgrounds and also go through a bunch of different character portraits. Here's an option where you can swap through different items and weapons, which is pretty neat to see them up close and personal. Now, I'm not sure, because again, I haven't played the Devil Children series, if any of these assets that I'm showing off in the debug menu are like completely holdovers from those games, or if anything is original to this particular alpha build of this unknown ROM. I don't know. Just one of those things, you know, it's like we get so many games in that if I were to, you know, play through every game in the series before I took a look at this, the video just wouldn't get done, basically. We'd release like an episode a year, approximately. So that's why I'm also kind of asking for your help at home as well. So if you have any idea as to what this could possibly be, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the description below. We would love to hear from you. So again, big thank you to MyRetroPop.com. MyRetroPop.com is an eBay store that focuses on retro gaming, and he also has, again, a lot of content like this, development carts, beta versions of games, that kind of stuff. So if that's something that you're interested in looking at and collecting, that would be a good place to start. I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the description below. Again, thank you very much. And of course, thank you to PushDustin of SourceGaming. He helped with a lot of the research of this particular episode and has been doing translations from Japanese for me for quite some time. So thank you again, sir. I wouldn't be able to do this without you. And thank you to all of you for watching, ringing that bell, subscribing, all that good stuff, and we'll see you all next time.